You've joined us for another deep dive. Today, we're looking closely at some important papers you shared. We've got parts of the National Master UPS Agreement, the Atlantic Area Supplemental, and also some guides about harassment and on-the-job supervision rides, OJS rides.
Right. There's quite a bit there.
Yeah, it's a lot of information, and honestly, that's why we're here. Our job today is basically to pull out what you really need to know about harassment and those OJS rides, so you can understand your rights.
That's right. It's all about making sense of these documents and highlighting the protections that are actually in place for you.
Exactly. And hey, before we jump in, we really want to give a big thank you to the folks who helped make this deep dive possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
This deep dive is sponsored by the Siblings of Solidarity SOS of Local 509.
Great group.
And we also want to send a special shout out this time to Aaron and Taylor of Local 509. They're down in the Palmetto building.
Oh, yeah. Aaron and Taylor. Good guys.
These two brothers are like pillars of SOS, really vital to the movement. We just appreciate all your hard work and dedication, guys.
Solidarity.
Solidarity.
Great work.
Okay, so let's take a calm look at this information together.
Sounds good. Let's begin with harassment. You sent over that document, 10 tips-harassment.pdf, from Kathy Duffy at Local 384.
Right.
Now, we don't have the actual 10 tips in front of us, but just having that document tells us this is definitely something people are thinking about.
For sure. And while that guide probably gives general advice, what's really key, I think, is that the National Master Agreement itself has some pretty fundamental rules against discrimination. And that connects right into harassment, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. That's a very important point. If you look at Article 36 of the National Master Agreement, I mean, it's spelled out quite clearly. The employer and the union both agree they will not discriminate against anyone based on things like, race, color, religion, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, national origin, physical disability, veteran status, age, or any other reason that's protected by law.
Wow. Okay. So it's a really broad list of protections.
It is very broad. And it doesn't just stop at who gets hired or initial stuff.
Right.
Article 36 also says the employer and union can't limit, separate, or classify employees in a way that takes away job opportunities because of those same protected characteristics.
Okay.
So the main takeaway for you, the listener, is if you feel like you're facing unfair treatment because of your race or your gender or, any of those protected things, this article is directly relevant. That's your starting point.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about not being treated unfairly just because of who you are. Now, we also got that document about just cause. How does that fit in with harassment?
Yeah, the Just Cause document is helpful because it gives us some context on how workplace rules, including the ones about harassment, are usually handled in union settings. It kind of shows us that for these rules to be enforced fairly, they really need to be clear and specific.
Right, not vague. Can you give an example? What do you mean by specific?
Yeah, sure. The document talks about a case where someone was fired for breaking an anti-violence rule.
Okay.
But that person actually got their job back because the employer hadn't clearly told everyone that even a little bit of touching would lead to being fired.
Ah, I see.
So what this tells us is if there's a rule about harassment, the company needs to be really upfront and clear about exactly what kind of actions are off limits.
So just having a general policy isn't quite enough. Needs details.
Exactly. And the Just Cause document also points out that even when there is a rule, the specific words used in that rule really matter.
How so?
Well, if a rule says the employer may terminate someone or that an offender is subject to discharge, that doesn't automatically mean they will be fired every single time.
Oh.
There's still room to look at the specifics of each situation. It's not always a zero tolerance trigger just based on that wording.
That's actually really good to know. It's not just if there's a rule, but how it's written and how clear it is.
Yeah.
Okay, now that Just Cause document also mentions something about a hypersensitive person in harassment cases.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds a little tricky.
It can be, yeah. The document mentions one case where a claim of sexual harassment wasn't upheld because the person who felt harassed was deemed hypersensitive by the arbitrator.
Yeah.
But then it also mentions another case where just casually touching someone on the shoulders was not considered sexual harassment.
So there's kind of a line between something being actual harassment and maybe someone's individual reaction. That feels complicated.
It's definitely a tricky area, and it really does depend on the specifics of each case, But I think it's important to remember that just because someone might be more sensitive than average, let's say, that doesn't give anyone a free pass to behave in a way that's genuinely harassing.
Right. Good
The
point.
main focus should probably still be on whether the behavior itself would be seen as offensive or create a hostile work environment for, like, a reasonable person.
That makes sense. Keep the focus on the action, not just the reaction. Um, what else did the just cause stuff say about discipline for harassment and how it's handled?
Well, it mentioned a case where an employee was making, like, off-color comments, inappropriate jokes. They'd been warned before.
Okay.
But their firing was actually changed to a suspension
Really? Why?
because the decision maker looked at the specific actions. There was no physical touching involved, no really abusive language, and the employee apparently had a good work history otherwise. So it shows that even with prior warnings, the punishment should kind of fit the crime, you know, and take other factors into account. It's not always automatic termination.
That seems fair.
Yeah.
Like there should still be progressive discipline sometimes, trying to correct behavior.
Exactly. And the document also talked about a situation where someone said something like, "I'll take action if this harassment continues."
Okay.
And that statement, because it was conditional about the future, wasn't seen as grounds for discipline itself.
Why? It wasn't a direct threat then and there?
Precisely. But, and this is a really important contrast, the document also makes it crystal clear that if someone threatens to, like, shoot or kill a supervisor,
Yeah.
that is almost always grounds for immediate discharge. Even if they later say, "Oh, I was just joking." There's a huge difference between talking conditionally about future actions and making direct threats of serious violence.
Absolutely. Those are definitely not the same thing at all. Okay, so if someone feels they are being harassed or discriminated against, what's the actual process? What should they do at UPS?
The main way to address these issues formally is through the grievance procedure. That's laid out in Article 8 of the National Master Agreement.
Article 8. Okay.
Yeah. That gives you a formal path to report your concerns and try to get them resolved. So if you believe your rights under that non-discrimination clause in Article 36 have been violated, or, if you feel you're being harassed generally, that's the process to follow. Start the grievance.
Okay, so that's the mechanism if those protections aren't being respected. Got it. Now, let's shift gears a bit to the on-the-job supervision rides, OJS rides. We also have that full OJS toolkit.pdf. What's the union's take on these, according to the toolkit?
Right, the toolkit. According to that document, the union seems to have some, let's say, concerns about OJS rides. The toolkit suggests that, sometimes anyway, management might use these rides to gather information that could potentially be used later to pressure employees to work faster, or maybe even find reasons for, harassment down the line. So, because of that perspective, the union really encourages members to be prepared for these rides.
So it's seen less as support and more as, like, scrutiny, close watching.
That seems to be the perspective presented in the toolkit, yeah. And because of that, it really hammers home the importance of getting ready before an OJS ride even happens.
Okay, so what kind of preparation does the toolkit recommend? What should people do?
Well, one of the most important things, and this is apparently a newer contract provision, is that you must get at least 24 hours notice before a ride-along.
24 hours, minimum.
Minimum. And the toolkit advises, pretty strongly, file a grievance right away if you don't get that notice. That 24-hour window gives you some breathing room, time to get yourself ready, make sure you're consciously following all the procedures. It's a right you have. Don't let it slide.
That's a really clear right everyone should know about. Definitely.
Yeah.
What else? Besides the notice, how else should they prepare for the ride itself?
The toolkit strongly recommends bringing a pen and a notebook with you on the ride. And write down everything that happens. Dates, times, who was there, what was said, what you did, what they did. This record can be incredibly important if any issues or, disagreements come up later.
Makes total sense. Having your own contemporaneous record is always smart.
Yeah.
What about when the workday actually starts on an OJS day? Any specific advice there?
Yeah, the toolkit emphasizes doing your pre-trip check exactly as you always do. Or as you should always do.
Right. Follow the methods.
Check the vehicle's air, make sure you have your DI at board, your delivery info, check tires, lights, all that stuff. The key is don't let management's presence make you rush or skip any of your usual safety checks. Stick to your routine.
Got it.
Right.
Follow all the normal steps. And then during the ride itself, what's the advice for that time?
The toolkit basically advises just do your job like you normally would.
Okay.
Follow all the standard procedures. Use Orion if that's part of your regular workflow. Use elevators if they're available on your route. Don't change your methods just because someone's watching. The idea is to show how you typically and properly perform your job.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And what about the supervisor? What should you be watching for in terms of what they do during the ride?
This is interesting. The toolkit specifically points out that supervisors should not be carrying packages or helping with deliveries during an OJS ride.
Oh, okay. They're supposed to just observe.
Exactly. The advice for members is to watch if this happens. If a supervisor starts grabbing packages, making deliveries, it might suggest the ride isn't purely about observation anymore. So yeah, the supervisor should just be watching, taking notes maybe, but not doing the physical work. Make a note if they do.
Interesting point.
Yeah.
The toolkit also lists some, specific questions members should be thinking about during the ride.
Yeah.
What are some of those key things to consider?
Yeah, there are several good ones. The toolkit suggests asking yourself things like, were you given any instructions that felt unsafe? Were you allowed to get help with packages over 70 pounds? And did you help others if needed? Were you told to CIR something, customer information release, without actually talking to the customer?
Yeah.
Were you asked to overload your hand truck? Or maybe denied using a hand truck when you felt you needed one? It also mentions noting if you were told to cut across lawns or other areas you wouldn't normally walk on. These are all specific things to watch for and document if they happen.
Those all sound like really important things to note, situations where maybe normal safe work practices could be compromised. What about directions or package info?
Right. The toolkit advises noting that too.
Right.
Did the supervisor point out specific packages in your truck for you? Did they tell you where your next stop was? Did they tell you how many packages were for a stop? Or suggest a specific way to drive your route, maybe different from how Orion or you would normally do it? Or tell you shelf numbers?
Okay.
These could potentially be seen as trying to manage your work in a way that's different from your regular methods. So again, if you notice that kind of thing happening, jot it down.
Basically, document anything that feels unusual or different from your normal routine or the established methods. Okay. Now, what if, after all this, management tries to give you a write-up, say, for production based on the OJS ride?
Yeah, if management tries to issue discipline, like a warning letter for production numbers after an OJS ride, the toolkit's advice is very clear. File a grievance.
Straight away.
Straight away. And it also recommends that you ask your union steward to file an information request to basically get management's data and reasoning behind the discipline. Get the union involved immediately.
Okay. Now, the National Master Agreement itself, does it have sections that directly relate to this kind of supervision?
Yes, it absolutely does. Article 37, Section 2 specifically talks about over-supervision harassment.
Okay.
And it specifically says that package drivers who are on the 9.5 list, those who've opted in to limit their hours, have the right to file a grievance if they work more than 9.5 hours a day for 3 or more days in a single work week. And importantly, the company is not allowed to retaliate by just piling on excessive overtime on the other 2 days as a punishment for being on the list. That's a key protection for 9.5 drivers.
That's a really important one for folks on the 9.5 list, definitely. What about just the frequency of these OJS rides? Can they just ride with you day after day? Is there anything in the agreement about that?
Yes, and this is a really, really important point for everyone to know. Article 37, Section 3 addresses this directly.
Okay, what does it say?
It says that if you file a grievance arguing that you are having an excessive number of rides, basically, that they're riding with you too much.
Yeah.
The agreement states that no member of management can ride with that employee again until the local level hearing for that specific grievance is finished.
Whoa, okay. So filing the grievance actually pauses the rides.
It pauses the rides related to that grievance, yes.
Yeah.
Now, there's a rule that the hearing should happen quickly, usually within 5 working days. It can be extended to 10 days if the union has a legitimate reason, like scheduling conflicts. But the key thing is, if you formally grieve what you believe are too many OJS rides, they are supposed to stop riding with you until that issue is addressed at the local hearing level. It's a significant protection against what might feel like relentless supervision while you're challenging the frequency of it.
That's huge. And that really connects back to what you said earlier about documenting everything.
Exactly. Right? It all ties together. The advice in the toolkit to document each OJS ride really carefully dates, times, duration, what happened, who was there. The more detailed your notes are, the stronger your case will be if you need to file that grievance about excessive supervision. You need evidence to back up your claim that it's happening too often.
So keeping those good records isn't just for like potential discipline issues from the ride, but it's also building the evidence you might need if you feel the rides themselves are becoming excessive or harassing.
Precisely. It's all interconnected. Knowing your rights about getting that 24-hour notice, knowing what to look for and document during the ride, and understanding these protections in Article 37 against over-supervision and the pause on rides during a grievance, it's all really crucial for protecting yourself.
This has been a really helpful breakdown of some pretty complex but clearly very important parts of the contract and these related guides. It's clear there are significant protections built in for both harassment and for these OJS rides.
That's right. And that was our goal in this deep dive, to pull out these key areas based on the info you shared. Hopefully understanding these details can help everyone feel a bit more informed and, frankly, better equipped to protect their rights at work.
Absolutely. And, as we always say, we really encourage you to actually read through the entire National Master Agreement and your specific supplement, like the Atlantic area one we mentioned. Get the full picture.
Definitely. There is no substitute for reading the source documents yourself.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thanks so much for joining us today and walking through this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Until next time, all for one and one for all. Solidarity.
Until next time, all for one and one for all. Solidarity.